Empath Queen. It's not just that you find dating multiple men hard logistically, you find it hard mentally and you find it hard morally. Hear me out. If you were raised to be kind to others and maybe you identify as being quite a loyal person, the part in early dating where you're supposed to be keeping your options open and put your best interests first in dating whilst building intimacy can just feel super emotionally chaotic and super uncomfortable, even when you know you should be putting your own needs first and your own future first, right? But you're still putting the needs of others first. And in this case, it's that one man you've been dating a couple of months, but who you don't yet know for a fact if he's your future life partner, but you like him a lot. Okay, in the last video linked below, we talked about what self-prioritization and self-preservation looks like in dating. And we went through the behaviors you can practically do in those early dating stages that help you to self-preserve in that early dating process and to stop yourself from losing yourself so early on and setting up a dating dynamic where you end up in a relationship where there is quite literally no space for you to begin with. But today we're going to unpack why it feels so hard to put yourself first in early dating and why you end up with that feeling of losing yourself in a relationship in the first place. Because it's not because you don't know what the right thing to do is. You definitely do. Theoretically, you know, but it feels confusing because putting your needs first on some level feels like being a bad person. Does that resonate? Because the real reason this is so hard, it's not dating, it's not really a time or logistics thing, it's not even an emotional bandwidth thing, it's identity, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, I'll explain more about identity in a second, but first, let's go into what's actually happening inside of you emotionally in early dating. And how do I know this, by the way? Because women tell me all the time, like my client Shelley, who kept finding herself in short-term relationships that ended around the 2-month mark. And I'm going to share her story in detail with her permission that she has kindly given us, because it's going to feel super, super clear how these short relationship cycles get set up from the very beginning. Because when I ask the women I'm coaching, are you still keeping an eye on the dating apps, or are you open at this point to dating another man at the same time? They will usually say something along the lines of, no, because it just doesn't feel honest or right. I want you to pay attention to that wording, honest or right, okay? Sometimes they say, I just can't really be bothered, or I don't really see the point. And every time we unpack that, it's not just that they're already over-attached, it's also because they don't want to bring emotional confusion into the mix, because dating in an intentional way does require emotional presence, a certain mindfulness, a strong ability to implement your boundaries, certain conversations, sometimes conflict navigation, emotional navigation. It's a whole thing. And so when you give this all to one early connection, when you're not really sure yet if it's actually going anywhere, of course you don't want to do that with multiple men. How can you? That would be exhausting. And this is where it gets twisted, because some of these behaviors are over investments. And this is the problem, right? In early dating, when no commitments have even been made, it's not cheating, it's not being a bad person, and it's not being disloyal to go on a date with another man. But it can feel like it to you. And keeping your options open and not over-investing so early on is literally how women go from single to life partnered in the quickest time that feels right and comfortable and aligned with them, because they understand that early dating is for due diligence, not 6 months in when you've already given so much. Early dating is a stage in dating where you really should be putting your own needs first. Okay, so let's actually name the internal conflict that stops you feeling energized enough to date in a way that benefits you. Because when you try to date in a self-prioritizing way, your body doesn't feel empowered, right? So when you don't date in that way, your body doesn't think, oh, I'm so empowered to be putting myself first. Instead, you go through somewhat of an internal emotional conflict that looks like a bit like this. and I call it the dating drain spiral. So thanks to Shelley, we're actually going to talk about it in a real life coaching situation, and what used to happen for her. And this doesn't have to be your exact story in detail, okay? But I'd be really curious to know what resonates with you from Shelley's story. Okay, so Shelley was and still is an amazing badass woman, successful in every area of her life except dating. And I'm going to tell you now that she is happily partnered up, but this story is going to take you into some uncomfortable places and some uncomfortable twists and turns. So I just wanted to give you, if you're like me and you just want to know that there is a happy ending at the end, there is, okay? Okay, so she came to me because she was convinced that she was a target for emotionally unavailable or manipulative men. Shelley actually wasn't having a problem meeting men on the dating apps, right? So about 1 week into coaching, she met, and I'm changing his name here, James. Let's call him James. Okay, so when she started dating James, she felt pretty emotionally detached. She felt desirable, right? She felt unstoppable. She was like, Lena, I know it's too early to know yet, but I feel super hopeful about this one. She was scoping the dating apps for other men, like I advised her to, and did go on a couple of first dates with 2 other men. But we know how this story is going to go. James quickly became her favorite man. She couldn't help but like him more than the others. She was like, there's something about him that clicks. The vibe is vibing. She did what so many of us do, me included, okay? When we feel head over heels for that one man, she overinvested emotionally and also physically. And because she didn't want to date other men, right? Now that there was like this deep emotional connection, they had talked about the deep stuff, and you know, their connection was physical. She felt, is it even right to date or be with someone else at this point? No actual commitment had been made, and remember that they're only 2 months into their connection. So when I asked her, well, okay, like, do you really know whether James is the right person for you just yet? I'm not saying has he proposed? I'm asking her, do you know if he has shown all of the qualities and all of the data that he is the right person for you yet? Do you know if you guys are compatible? She was truthful and she said no, because there's no way you can know that at 2 months. But she didn't feel so emotionally detached anymore. At the beginning, right, she was like, I'm beautiful, I'm desirable, I feel so confident in myself. She still felt somewhat like that, but she didn't feel so detached. She was very focused on James. And the question that lingered was, is it right to date others? This is what we coached on, right? It didn't feel right to her, and she didn't want to cheat on him, even though you know that's impossible because no commitment has actually been made. So she pulled the trigger and had the exclusivity conversation with James. She asked James if he was seeing anyone else and whether he'd want to be exclusive. And what do you think he said? Of course he said yes. He wanted to be exclusive because Shelley was such an amazing, beautiful, fun, smart, emotionally intelligent woman, just like you. No-brainer question for James. Of course James wasn't going to be seeing it. Of course he wasn't going to be like, yeah, I'd be totally cool with you seeing other men. No, James wasn't seeing anyone else either, okay? And in hindsight, Shelley realized that's not necessarily a compliment or a good thing, but we're going to get into that later. We're not in that part of the story yet. So about 6 weeks in, James and Shelley had a disagreement about something, which is actually pretty normal, okay? There's nothing wrong in conflict. In fact, conflict in those early stages is an amazing way to actually navigate. How do you guys actually deal with that conflict, okay? And they resolved it. But this suddenly made Shelley feel less trusting and a little bit unsure of whether she had seen a red flag or not. Again, this is very normal. Something will happen and you don't really know if it's a red flag. And how could you possibly know? It's super normal to not know whether something's a red flag. You've got to see it out. She found herself in this position, and I want you to pay close attention. She didn't want to break the connection. She wanted to keep the connection rolling to learn more about him and see if there's really compatibility. Was that a red flag? Or is that something that just smooths out over time, and that because she doesn't know his true character yet, when she gets a more expanded understanding of his true character, then she'll know whether that's a red flag or not. Because sometimes that's just the way it is, right? But she also started to feel a very small desire, more of a curiosity, to see what else is out there, to date other men. Okay, so now Shelley finds herself in a really, really weird place, which I have definitely been in, and some of my other clients have too, when you're not comfortable with dating multiple men, of having to raise this conversation with James about seeing other people again. And, you know, she kind of wanted to take a step back from exclusivity. Now, remember, she's had this exclusivity conversation. So it's only fair in a relationship where the communication is clear, transparent, and you're showing up as honest and authentic to have the conversation. So she refrains from doing this for a while, but as they continue to date, she starts to worry, right? So she doesn't want to have that conversation. Her instincts are telling her that this conversation is going to be super tricky to navigate. So as they continue to date, she starts to worry more and more about her over-investment in James. Can you see how the dialogue has changed? It was starting with, oh my God, like this, I really hope he's the one, to I'm not so sure anymore, and now I feel over-invested. She actually lost sleep over it, right? It was actually making her feel mentally ill. I don't know if you guys have been there, but that feeling of like not being able to sleep at night because you're like, oh my God, am I wasting time? Have I over-invested? Is this man going to rip my beating heart out? She doesn't know, okay? She loses sleep over it. Not necessarily because she doesn't want to keep rolling out the connection and keep seeing what it's about, but it's the anxious spiral of, is he the right man or not? Because she realizes she's overcommitted, okay? Eventually, she raises the conversation and James gives her the ultimatum. Ladies, this is how the conversation sometimes goes. If you want to see other people, then this is over with me, is basically what James says. You see, James is a human being too. We're not demonizing James in this, okay? And the idea of this golden little heart being rejected and then being compared to other men and having to take a step back, and Shelley's now dating other men, right? After having made the exclusivity pact, let's call it that, with him, it now makes him feel anxious and almost like he was being punished. It suddenly became a power play accidentally. And Shelley obviously didn't intend this. You see it from her perspective, right? Being a woman, you see it from her perspective. She was just excited about him. She didn't want to see other men. She was really invested. She didn't intend to give him an ultimatum and make a power play of like, well, this conflict has now made me want to step back. It makes him feel judged. It makes him feel unconditionally loved. And obviously, there's no such thing as unconditional love this early on in a connection, in a romantic connection. And there really shouldn't be if you're dating in a healthy way. But nobody wants to feel that way. So Shelley didn't intend this, but it came across this way, right? They're both good people. They were both trying to do the right thing. It's gone wrong, okay? Because, yeah, she's basically now saying, I didn't like the way you behave, so I'm going to start seeing other men, which made James feel like, well, what's the point then? You see, if you agree, what's the lesson here? Let's unpack that tiny part first. You see, if you agree to exclusivity too soon, and as the connection with your once favorite man plays out, you realize you might want to actually explore other connections while still giving this man a chance. And so you now have to renegotiate the exclusivity and a conversation. And that part feels stressful. If she hadn't had such an early premature, because remember, she triggered it. He didn't ask for this, right? Which is what makes it doubly cruel to James, right? So because she triggered that premature exclusivity conversation with him, if she hadn't done that, she would have actually been able to date other men with a clean conscience. And that's the part I actually forgot to mention, because if I said that and it triggered you, that she would have been able to date other men with a clean conscience, that's the part I forgot to mention to you. Shelley was actually raised to be kind to others. It was hardwired in her. In fact, she had a strict idea of morality, and basically what this means is she wasn't ever going to cheat. And so she was never going to cheat after this exclusivity conversation, right? And I agree with that. That's not authentic relating. I wouldn't encourage that, because when we treat others badly, firstly, I'm obviously one of those people that was raised to be kind to others. I'm obviously going to say something like, it's not the right thing to do. But let's actually talk about it in a different way, because that's not healthy for you guys, because you were also raised to be excessively kind to others and kind of disregard yourself, right? So when we treat others badly, we actually subconsciously lower our standards for how other people treat us, because we actually expect it. You actually very subconsciously expect yourself to be treated the way other people the way that you treat people, right? It's bad karma. So you can actually see how I'm not telling you, I'm making this clear, because in this scenario, I'm not telling you to play games or to treat people badly. What is it that I'm actually saying? I'm saying, if you genuinely really care about being honest and kind to men in dating, don't make promises you can't keep. Keep your options open until it's really clear to you that this man is a long-term partner with the same life goals. Get clear on that thing first, right? Get clear on the fact that that feeling of your commitment to him is reciprocal, and that conversation has been had. Because now back to Shelley, right? The drama of the whole breakup, because Shelley is an emotional soul and she felt it. She still wanted to see him. She cared for James. All she wanted to do was keep her options open. She didn't want to hurt him. But in the end, her dating journey to partnership got so sidetracked because James and Shelley broke up, and she now had to go on a whole side quest of healing from her breakup with James because she really liked him, right? For a relationship that only lasted 2 months. Anyway, because you need to know that there's a happy ending. James and Shelley actually got back together 3 months later, but it didn't actually work out for that particular relationship, right? And at that point, Shelley realized that she had to move slower in dating, and that is what I guided her on. By the way, I'm not one of those coaches that says stay unexclusive until you have a ring on your finger, because realistically that's going to be really tricky. It's going to be really hard to build a relationship of trust under those circumstances. But there is an appropriate time that is specific to your relationship with the specific man that you are dating, and there are certain milestones in that connection that help both of you build a relationship that has direction, okay? Relationships can still break up, even with the best of intentions. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anyone has done anything wrong. But this video is about prioritizing your best interests in dating so that you're not getting drained by overcommitting too soon. And by the way, men don't often date more than one woman once. Not because they're super committed to the women that they're dating, but because they can't really be bothered. They're getting their emotional and physical needs met by this particular woman, right? He's dating. And because they're not always dating with long-term intention, or even when they are, even when they say they are, or even when they genuinely are, they don't feel so much pressure on time the way women do. Society doesn't pressure men as much as women. So if you're dating intentionally for long-term relationship or marriage, it's your responsibility to put your best interests first. You cannot rely on anyone else to do that for you. So an exclusivity conversation too early on really doesn't mean anything. It is meaningless. And here's the take home. Why did Shelley really feel the need to fast track that exclusivity conversation with James? Yes, definitely because she was overattached, but also because of that overattachment, right? There would have been guilt to see other men in that moment. It's the guilt, okay? So instead, what could Shelley have done, right? She could have done is that not had that exclusivity conversation, refrained from seeing other men until it felt right to her. And then when that curiosity started to spark, she could have then opened up her options to date other men. There would have been technically nothing to declare to James because that wouldn't have been being dishonest in the connection. No promises have been made, and James is also free to do the same thing. And you probably already know this, right? But men don't feel the need to get permission from you to move on. How many times have you been dating a man and he's dropped you at 2 months, 3 months, and he's not even felt the need to break up with you? He's just ghosted you or just drifted off. They don't need to get your permission to do that. So why do you need to get their permission to date other men when no promises have been made? You don't, okay? But remember, we're talking about the deeper reason why you find it hard to date other men, okay? The chances are Shelley would have still found it really difficult to date other men even without the exclusivity conversation, because there's physical intimacy, and underneath all the actions she takes in dating, there is a strong need for her to be a good person to others before being a good person to herself. There is a strong sense of what it means to be kind. And breaking that sense just feels wrong. On some level, you're wired to be loyal and kind to others before yourself. You're wired to put the needs of others above your own. The needs of others always feel more urgent than yours. Have you noticed that? The man wants you not to date other men. You don't want to treat him badly. You want to be kind. You don't want to make him feel unimportant, unvalued. So you put the loyalty to the connection over the loyalty to yourself, your dating journey, and over the loyalty to your actual desire for being life partnered, even though no commitment has actually been made because it's simply too soon, right? This man has promised you nothing. And that's why you feel like you're losing yourself all the time. Your nervous system might read putting your best interests in dating as you doing something wrong. Not because you actually are, but because your system was trained for relational duty, not self-alignment and self-prioritization. And this is where the exhaustion starts. Not from dating, but from who you feel you have to be in the modern dating process. And you think, why does this keep happening? I'm such a loving person. And yes, you've been loving everyone except yourself. Here's the part that you need to hear, and I really want you to hear this, okay? Sometimes you have to be untrue to others to really be true to yourself. And for kind, considerate, loyal women like you, that just feels morally wrong, because hurting someone else hurts you more than being hurt yourself. You feel stronger than others because you've had to be, but that's not strength. That's self-abandonment dressed as kindness, okay? So the real question isn't, why do I keep attracting emotionally unavailable or narcissistic men? Remember, Shelley asked me that question. It's actually, where did this conditioning of guilt to put myself first come from? Where did this misplaced sense of loyalty, duty, and obligations to others before your own best interests? Because we now know that shows up in dating, right? And we'll be talking about where that feeling actually comes from, because this didn't start in dating. Click the next video to find out.